Hey guys, this is Mikro. I wanted to talk about fundamentals of New World, how they have changed since launch, and kind of tips in general that will help you live. I've seen a lot of influx of like newer players to the game as well as a lot of returning players, and I figure that this video will be a helpful refresher for most people, and for people that haven't seen it, it will just be really helpful to understand. The most fundamental thing within New World, within PvE, PvP, open world, like any game mode you play, is to not gray bar unless you absolutely have to. Gray barring is basically a death sentence in every single mode. Gray bar is when your stand bar, which is the thing that you see right above my HP bar right now, if that turns to gray, which happens either from dodging or blocking, then while this is happening, I can't jump, I can't dodge, I can't block, and I will fundamentally just take a lot more damage. There is one time that gray barring is actually useful, and that is right before you get below half HP, because right when you get below half HP, your stam recovery will proc. When your stam recovery procs, your entire bar will get filled back up again. But other than that, like one specific instance, it's really important to not gray bar because you will just basically leave yourself helpless to incoming burst damage. Sometimes I will purposely gray bar when I'm getting below half HP. I wait for the damage to income, and then I spam a dodge immediately afterward, just to allow myself to have that benefit from the stam recovery, but that's like the only specific circumstance where it is useful. It's really important though to try to be as low as possible for that stam recovery to trigger for that stam bar. So that's like a kind of another aside that's like fundamental. If you have your stam bar at full and you get hit below half HP, that stam recovery proc is completely wasted, right? So it's just not going to be useful at all. And if you find yourself doing that, you need to figure out a way to use dodges earlier in that fight to prevent damage that's incoming, so that when your health gets actually below half HP, you can take advantage of that stam recovery. And if you find that to be impossible to do within whatever mode you're playing, you probably don't need stam recovery for that mode. Like if you're a 5 con DPS player doing PvE, stam recovery might not be the best option for you if you don't use dodges all the time. Most people use dodges all the time though, which is why stam recovery is still considered to be the best in slot perk. Honestly, probably the best perk in the game in terms of armor, jewelry, etc. right now, just because of how strong that is. Try not to spam dodges two together. So if you do a double dodge like this is less efficient than doing something like a dodge into a hop in basically every circumstance. The dodge and a hop will cover the same distance, and hopping has a better kind of mechanic that happens with stamina regeneration. So when you dodge, there's a little bit of a window that you have to wait before your stam starts regenning, versus if I hop, then the stam will start regenning immediately afterwards. So it's a more or it's better to try to dodge in a hop than it is to double dodge, because your stamina will just continue to regen afterward. And another tip that's kind of along those same lines is often when I'm low on stamina, I'll try to use an ability, because while I'm using an ability, that stamina will regen, right? And that while that stamina is regenning, I'm still getting the benefit of using an ability, which is usually an important thing to cast. So usually if I'm getting to a spot where I'm low on my stam, then I'll try to use an ability. Flow has a thing where it will give you an extra stam boost if you're below a certain threshold too, so that's nice, and it just allows you to be in that fight for longer. Hopping in general is really not used a lot within New World, but it's super good. One thing it's really useful for is if you're slowed in an area, hopping will always have the same distance, if you're slowed or not slowed, because you're in the air, you're not on the ground, I guess, or something weird like that. But versus if you're trying to walk, you'll be slower when you move from side to side, so it's often better to try to hop in areas that you are consistently slowed. Dodges will also be reduced within distance, so hopping is just strictly better than every other movement mechanic while you're within a slowed area. So this is really useful if you're like in an ice storm, for example, if you're doing PvE during the ice mutation of Genesis, for example, with Icebound, there's like a slow effect that goes off. So it's like in those circumstances, I like to hop to get out of those slow effects, and I often find myself kind of creating distance from the rest of my teammates because they don't realize that hopping is just better in terms of creating more space. Uh, Dodging will stop that stam regen. We kind of touched on this already. So you want to be really careful when it comes to regenerating stam. Like if you're trying to regen your stam and you keep like dodging and then you wait a bit and then you dodge again and then you wait a bit, like you're never going to regen that stam fully. You need to find a spot that you're okay, just taking a bit to just either swing or use an ability to regen that stam fully, and then you go back to dodging again. It's often people like to panic a lot when they're taking damage, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm taking damage, I need to just use my dodge, and that's basically how you die. You need to be okay accepting some damage. You have to trade your health for that stam regeneration sometimes, and that's like the best play to do. Bunny hopping is possible within New World too. You see me doing it from side to side here, but it is possible to change this to going forward as well. You just need to have a 90-degree turn every time you go for the hop. So it's like something that's kind of useful in order to get out of circumstances. The main thing that applies to that movement tech applies to running the wall, which I don't believe I have on this character, but I have on like every other character at this point, where the wall you can't actually dodge anymore, but you can get that free bunny hop. There is another mechanic too when it comes to taking incoming damage from from stagger effects. If you get hit from 2 stagger effects at the same time, while you aren't pressing your shift or your dodge button, you can trigger a free dodge roll. This dodge roll can be triggered with the wall, it can be triggered in heavy, it can be triggered in medium, any weight class. It does not cost stamina, and it effectively is a light roll. So the distance that you would get normally from a light roll, which is like a very long portion. Like you get that like that distance just for free on any single class by just triggering that dodge effect. So it's very, very useful. Not a lot of people go for it, but it is something that is the reason why the flail meta has shifted, because this deflecting frailty bonus triggers 2 stagger effects within at the same time. So you can just give anytime you're hit from a flail with a kite shield and you get staggered, you could just trigger this free dodge roll and just create distance, which is why in war meta, the kite shield is not very useful anymore, and people tend to prefer to go with a tower shield instead. But I still like to use the kite shield in OPR 3v3 smaller scale because people aren't actually good enough at the mechanic to where they're able to take advantage of it consistently. And the main thing with it that you have to know is that you don't want to just use your dodge right away, because if you use your dodge right away, it doesn't always work. You need to wait for that second to hit to come in before you press that shift key, and then it will create that distance, which is very, very useful. Blocking is also something that's underrated for a lot of classes. Now, if you're VG, you obviously can't block unless you have a Void Blade out, but that's like very, very weird. But blocking is really useful versus classes that do light attacks versus you, and you don't want to kind of guess when they're going to be doing damage to you, if that makes sense. So it's really useful versus SNS, Great Axe, Flail, Spear, like any of these like one-handed weapons too, or it's like super useful versus two-handed. It's a little bit more sketchy, but versus these classes in particular, if they're doing a light attack versus you, you will save more stam by blocking in every single weight class than you will by dodging, which is something that's like difficult to get used to, but if you get used to it, you will find yourself with more stam regen. It is more advanced, though. I wouldn't recommend trying to block a lot of attacks from a newer player. You kind of have to read the what attacks are coming in. You have to know what's going to hit you, how much stamina it's going to take. But if you do master it, it will allow you to stay alive for a lot longer. Your health pots within New World are very, very useful, but you want to be using the right ones in the right circumstances. If you're out of a fight, hearty meals or some sort of a consume, there's like a better version of hearty meals that you can get if you craft them. You have to have cooking level high enough. But like popping these hearty meals, you want to be doing out of fight. The pots, like the infused health pots, you want to be doing if you can't be healed by burst with a healer. And until the PTR patch comes to live for season 4. It is important to try to pop these pots when you are within a sacred, because the sacred will boost the effectiveness of the pots by about 1.5 times. So it's just like worth it to try to find a friendly sacred, pop a pot in that, and then move out of it. And versus regen pots are just kind of best used basically off cooldown whenever you enter in a fight and there's some damage that's incoming. You don't really have to worry about these as much, and the same with regeneration serums. You just want to pop them at the start of a fight and not really think about them too much. Regeneration serums and infused regen pots get value over time, so it's important to pop these early. The infused health pot's best as a burst tool, and then the hearty meal is kind of a last resort if you are out of a fight and you don't want to use your other pots, or if you are in a spot where you have no pots on cooldown. So all of those are situationally good, and will help you kind of stay alive more. The other thing too within New World, this mostly applies to war players, but now it actually applies to every player with the bonus of having Purifying Heart on your ring. If you see a lot of like debuffs on your bar when you look down here and this entire thing is red, you want to pop your Cleanse pot if you want to live. The most common way to die in New World is from burst, and burst typically happens when you have a lot of debuffs on you. So if you see a lot of debuffs on you, it's important to pop a Cleanse effect. The main ones within the game are Purifying Heart, a Cleanse pot, which comes from War, or use Ice Gauntlets and Tomb effect with Cleansing Tomb. All of these will get rid of all those debuffs and will just fundamentally help you live better. There are a few more, or a few other related effects, but they'll typically get rid of like 1 or 2 debuffs on your bar, so they're not as effective. One in particular that's like somewhat useful is SNS's Free Injustice. So if you go for a heavy attack, which you could do a half heavy attack now to proc this, which you couldn't do with some of the heavy related effects before, you can get rid of a debuff on you, and then if you have reverse stabs perk, you can get rid of 2 debuffs on you with this as well. So with SNS, you can basically just get rid of debuffs on yourself passively. Another one that's somewhat useful is Michael, which I don't have upgraded here, but if you block with Michael, you can get rid of a debuff on you. That being said, blocking with the kite shield's a little bit sketchy, so I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time, but it is useful at times. The other thing I wanted to talk about too, if you are in the light class or in a medium class, it is better to use absorption pots that than actual what do you call them? It's better to use absorption pots than it is to use gemstone dust. And if you're in heavy, it's better to use gemstone dust or oak flesh for burst situations. But the absorption pots are better for duration over time. Now, absorption pots are something that not a lot of people have used within New World for a long period of time, but the advantage that they have is they give you old fortify, which will allow you to just kind of live better than the fortify that you get from standard pots. So this is an example of a absorption pot that's relatively popular. It's a flame or fire absorption pot. This gives fire absorption for 30 seconds. This effect is boosted by your bags. So if you go to your gathering spot in here, the tools and bags, there's this silver crow's satchel which you can get for free. There's also like an artisan one that you can craft that's relatively cheap. This lasting consumption bonus will affect the duration of those pots, which just makes them significantly better in a typical stance than gemstone dust and oak flesh. But oak flesh and gemstone stuff still have their uses. It's just like a little bit less dominant than it used to be. Typically, people go for flame absorption pots with an OPR, a 3v3. Well, in 3v3, it's kind of weird because you want it more. You want more burst than duration over time. So in those circumstances, I've seen people typically run oak and gemstone dust, but flame absorption pots are kind of the key for open world for the most part, because there's a lot of random fire damage that comes out from things like the blunderbuss, the musket even has some, and the fire staff. And all of these are like very high sources of damage, and you will get lots of value off of those. Arcane absorption pots are very useful for clump situations because people like to run detonate still, and detonate does arcane damage, as well as flow has a good amount of arcane damage, so you can kind of mitigate that damage as well. I myself prefer still to run gemstone dust and oak flesh because I use those to mitigate burst situations rather than just having that boost up over time for a long period of time. And then if you are one of those players that likes to use these for burst situations, but you don't want to be spending a ton of gold right now, you can get strong gemstone dust because people use this to level for about 2 gold, versus this powerful gemstone dust costs about 100 gold. So this is like 50 times cheaper, and it is weaker, but it is a good way to save a decent amount of money for things like OPR and the open world. But in 3v3 and war, I try to use the more expensive version of that equipment, if that makes sense. With that being said, let me know if you guys have any other tips. The only other one I can think of too that not a lot of people use is to use Desert Sunrise, and especially in OPR right now at the kind of the bow and fire staff meta, because this will reduce the duration of dot effects and will just overall help you live a lot better. But with that being said, if you guys learned anything new, please leave a like and consider subscribing. We're nearly at 5K subs, which is absolutely crazy. And I'll see you guys in the next video.